They don't take you seriously yet. You're underestimated, overlooked, dismissed as harmless because you haven't made your move. But that's exactly how real threats are born. Quiet, unassuming, focused. While the loud ones are busy posturing, you're building, sharpening. And by the time they realize what you've become, it's already too late. That's the game. And Machiavelli knew it better than anyone. The most dangerous kind of power doesn't announce itself. It accumulates insolence through obsession, discipline, and a kind of ruthless focus that terrifies people the moment they recognize it because they know they can't replicate it. They know they're too distracted, too fragile, too addicted to being seen. But you're about to learn how to vanish into your own ambition and return as someone noon dares to challenge. Now, the firstly they'll tell you is that power comes from connections, from being liked, from knowing the right people, attending the right events, shaking the right hands. That's surface-level noise. Machiavelli would laugh at that. He understood something deeper, something unsettling. That real power comes from control. Not over others at first, but over yourself, your mind, your focus, your time, your urges. The people who become threats aren't those with privilege. They're the ones who cut out every weak part of themselves like a surgeon with no anesthesia. They isolate. Not because they hate people, but because they understand people. And more importantly, they understand what people do to your focus. Distractions aren't just time wasters. They're assassins. Every notification, every dopamine hit, every pointless conversation is a theft. Not just of your minutes, but of your potential. Most people live like open windows. Every sound, every breeze, every voice gets in. But if you're going to become someone dangerous, you need to close the damn windows. Seal them shut. Choose what enters your mind like a dictator chooses who gets through the gates. Because not everything deserves your attention. Not every conflict deserves a reaction. Not every opportunity is worth your energy. Focus is your empire. Guard it like a tyrant. And this is where most people break. They crave too many things at once. They want power, but they also want comfort. They want admiration, but also invisibility. They want to build something, but can't sit alone with their thoughts for an hour. They multitask their way into mediocrity, mistaking movement for progress. You want to know how to spot someone who's going nowhere. They're always busy, always talking about what they're working on. But the ones who become threats, they're ghosts. You don't see them coming. You don't hear them brag, you just feel their presence one day. Sharp, exact, unignorable. Machiavelli believed that you should never show all your cards. But the deeper lesson behind that is this. You should be doing things so calculated, so precise that no one even knows there are cards being played. Silence is your camouflage. Focus is your weapon. And when the two combine, you become invisible. Not in a mystical sense, but in a psychological one. Noon knows what drives you. No one knows what distracts you. No one can predict your next move because your mind isn't for public viewing. You've locked it down. You've turned it into a fortress, and people fear what they cannot read. But here's the catch. It's not enough to just isolate yourself from distraction. That's the first step. What matters next is what you do with that silence. Some people escape noise only to replace it with another kind of emptiness. They scroll in private. They daydream. They romanticize discipline but never act. So the question is, what's filling the space when the world shuts off? Is it clarity? Is it action? Or is it more noirs just dressed up in solitude? When you're alone, you either become someone terrifying or someone forgettable. There's no middle ground. The Machiavellian path is not about raw ambition. It's about refined ambition. It's not just wanting more. It's knowing exactly what to want, why you want it, and what you're willing to destroy for it. Most people never get that far. They wander between goals like drunk soldiers fighting battles they don't understand for outcomes they haven't defined. That's why their focus scatters. That's why they panic. They don't know what they're building. But you must. Because once you know the shape of your mission, focus stops being a chore. It becomes instinct, obsession, fire. Let's make this clear. Focus is not about willpower. That's what weak minds believe. They think if they just try harder, they'll resist the temptation. That's amateur thinking. Real focus is about structure. You engineer your environment so distractions don't even have a chance. You set rules. You design your day like a strategist designs a battlefield. Every hour has a purpose. Every input has a gatekeeper. Your phone doesn't rule you. Your calendar doesn't trap you. Your mind isn't a democracy, it's a kingdom. And only one voice makes the decisions. And this kind of structure, it's rare because it requires one thing above all else. The willingness to be misunderstood. See, when you become truly focused, you become threatening. Not just to your rivals, but to your friends. Your absence starts to offend them. Your silence becomes suspicious. Your discipline feels like judgment. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold, that you're too intense. Let them. Because every time they say that, you're on the right path. You're leaving their realm of the familiar and stepping into something they can't follow. Power. There's this phrase Machiavelli hinted at often. Not in words, but in tone. The idea that people are not loyal to you, they're loyal to their needs. And if you want their respect, you don't meet those needs. You become the need. You become the one person they can't ignore. Found presence they feel even when you're not in the room. And how do you do that? By building so ruthlessly in silence. They have no choice but to notice when the results speak. Focus until you're undeniable. Focus until you're a problem. But here's where it sharpens. True focus creates distance, and that distance becomes power. The less you need, the more you control. Most people are owned by what they crave. Attention, validation, ease. But the focused man, he needs nothing but the mission. That's why you can't be manipulated. That's why you can walk away. That's why people start fearing your silence more than they ever feared someone else's words. You're not reactive. You're not emotional. You're precise. And that precision, it starts small. You don't build a threat overnight. You start by reclaiming 1 hour, then 2. Then you take back your mornings, then your mind, then your week, and slowly the world that once dictated your time begins to bend to you. People adjust to your pace, your boundaries, your silence. And one day you'll realize the power isn't in being heard, it's in being felt. You'll sit in a room and say nothing and still dominate the energy. Because people sense when they're around someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Someone who's already won a war they can't even see. Someone who's been training in the shadows while they were busy shining in places that didn't matter. And the best part, by the time they realize you're a threat, you're already too far ahead to stop. They'll start to notice something they can't explain. You're not louder, not richer, not even more visible. Yet something about you feels dangerous. It's the way you move, the way you speak less, but when you do, it lands. The way you seem unaffected by the chaos that rattles everyone else. That's not charisma. That's a focus. And real focus creates tension. It makes people uncomfortable because your presence is proof of their own scattered mind. You become a mirror. They don't want to look into because you reflect what they lack. Clarity, control, and the discipline to stay the course. But make no mistake, this kind of focus will cost you. It will cost you your comfort, your need to explain yourself, your craving to be understood. You'll outgrow rooms. You'll notice conversations feel slower. People you used to relate to will now feel like noise. And for a while it'll feel lonely. That's the part no one talks about. The Machiavellian path isn't glamorous. It's quiet, unforgiving, a sharpening that never stops. But that loneliness, it's not emptiness. It's the clearing. The mental space that most never experience because they never push past the noise. And once you've had a taste of it, the world feels different. You're no longer seduced by urgency. You choose what matters. And here's where it flips. People start to follow. They don't even know why, but they sense you have something they don't. And they'll call it presence, confidence, discipline. But they're all symptoms of one thing. Direction. You know where you're going. They don't. That's their real advantage. You're not faster, you're more precise. You waste less. You wander less. You aren't trying everything. You're mastering one thing. And that singularity is intimidating because it creates momentum. And in a world addicted to distraction, momentum is mythical. People don't understand how you're progressing while they're stuck in place. They think you're lucky. They don't realize you cut the noise at the root. Marchi would say, if you want to become untouchable, don't be everywhere. Be somewhere so deeply, so relentlessly that people have to come to you. Make your presence a destination. That doesn't just apply to physical space. It applies to mindset, to energy, to how you operate. If you're always accessible, always available, always responding, then you're always predictable. And the predictable man is never powerful. He's comfortable, he's convenient, and ultimately he's disposable. But you're becoming scarce. Not out of arrogance, but out of refinement. Every time you say no to something beneath your mission, your power sharpens. Every time you delay gratification, you build a kind of tension in yourself that turns into influence later. It's like loading aspirin. Most people release early. You hold, you compress, you store, and then when you move, it's explosive, efficient, precise. That's what it means to be a threat. Not to be constantly fighting, but to be ready. Always ready and unreadable. And here's the cruel truth. People won't warn you that you're losing your focus. They'll encourage it. They'll invite you out when you need to be building. They'll praise your balance when you compromise. They'll celebrate your fun when you break your routine. Not because they want the best for you, but because your discipline reminds them of their own laziness. And if they can pull you back down, even for a moment, it validates their choices. That's why focus isn't just a personal discipline. It's a rebellion, a threat to the mediocrity around you. And the more focused you become, the more silent enemies you'll attract. But let them come, because you're not here to be liked. You're here to build leverage, and focus is the most underrated form of leverage in existence. You can buy influence. You can fake status, but you can't cheat time. And if you can focus longer than others can stay distracted, you win. Period. There's a moment that happens when you're deep in this path. You stop caring about milestones, about validation, about whether people are clapping. You start falling in love with the process itself, the quiet repetitions, the unsexy decisions, the things no one sees. And when you do, something inside you clicks. You realize you don't need motivation. You have momentum, and momentum is what makes you unstoppable. Most people chase hacks, systems, quick wins. But if you study anyone who's actually dangerous, anyone who commands a room without trying, who speaks and others fall silent, it's not because they know some trick. It's because they've gone deeper than anyone else is willing to. They've mastered something while the rest sampled everything. And that depth, it radiates. You don't need to announce it. People feel it. That's what focus buys you. A depth so strong your very existence becomes a statement. Now here's a move Machiavelli would respect deeply. While others are chasing followers, you chase frameworks. While they build vanity, you build systems. You structure your habits. You design your time. You analyze your weaknesses like a general planning a siege. And every day you cut away the unnecessary. You become lighter, sharper, faster. This isn't minimalism. It's weaponization. You're not simplifying for aesthetics. You're simplifying for war. Because make no mistake, this is war. Not with others, but with your former self. The lazy version, the distracted version, the insecure version that needed praise just to stay on track. You're killing that version slowly, precisely. And every day you focus. You bury him deeper. That's the real threat. Not what you're doing, but what you're leaving behind. The parts of you that were once weak. That's what scares people. That you've burned the bridge back to who you used to be. And the craziest part, you won't even notice the change until one day someone asks how you got here. And you'll realize you were just busy focusing. While they were watching, comparing, second-guessing, you were executing quietly, ruthlessly, without applause. So now ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice for focus? Because you can't have both freedom and noise. You can't hold on to every opinion, every friend, every comfort, and still become something rare. You have to choose not once, but every day, every hour, every minute. You choose focus or you choose noise. And every time you choose noise, you pay in silence later. In regret, in potential, in what could have been. The question isn't whether you're smart enough. It's whether you're obsessed enough, because obsession is the real separator. It's the difference between dabbling and domination, between being interested and being feared. You want to become a threat? Obsess over your craft, over your discipline, over your time. Let the world call you extreme. Let them misunderstand. They're not supposed to get it. They haven't earned the right to. You don't need applause. You don't need permission. You don't need them to believe in you. You just need to keep sharpening the one thing they're too afraid to touch, your focus. There's this moment, a shift so subtle most people miss it, but you won't. It's when your focus stops being something you have to force and starts being something that possesses you. Like it grabs you from the inside and pulls you into your work, your craft, your plan. You no longer need motivation videos, reminders, calendars full of checkboxes. You just do. It's mechanical, inevitable, automatic. And once you've tasted this mode, this full immersion state, nothing else will satisfy you. Distractions feel hollow. Conversations feel slow. Social media feels like poison. Not because you're better than it, but because it doesn't align with where you're headed anymore. That's the turning point. And Machiavelli would have said it clearly. When your focus begins to change your environment, not the other way around. You've stepped into power. Think about that for a second. Most people are shaped by their surroundings. They mirror. They blend in. They adapt. But the focused man bends his environment to serve his mission. He reorganizes his life, his relationships, his inputs. If something threatens the mission, it's removed without drama, without guilt, because power doesn't beg for permission. It restructures reality. And now we have to talk about energy because it's directly tied to this path. Focus isn't just about where your eyes are. It's where your energy lives. Every time you get angry at something irrelevant, every time you respond to a petty insult, every time you explain yourself to someone who isn't even listening, you leak power. You bleed energy. And slowly, silently, you weaken yourself. Machiavelli warned against this. Never waste your strength on people who cannot affect your position. A king doesn't argue with peasants not out of arrogance but out of discipline, because he knows attention is currency, and wherever you spend it, you're investing. So what are you funding with your focus? This is where most lose, not because they lack vision but because they lack restraint. They spread themselves thin, one day here, one day there, 100 unfinished ideas, 1,000 unmade decisions, but the Machiavellian way is the opposite, constriction. Focus until there is only one path, only one outcome, and you burn everything else. No plan B, no safety net, just forward. And people call that risky. But is it really? Or is it riskier to live scattered, to reach the end of your life having never gone all in on anything? Look around. Everyone's chasing options, infinite choices, endless flexibility. But flexibility is weakness. When you need to become a weapon, a sword is not flexible. A sniper is not flexible. They are built for precision, focus, impact. If you want to be liked by everyone, go beverage. If you want to be respected, build something no one else can. And that only happens when you lock in so intensely, so obsessively that the world starts to shrink. You stop seeing what's irrelevant. You stop needing constant stimulation. You enter the zone. And once you're in the zone, protect it like your life depends on it, because in a way it does. You can't stay in that state by accident. It requires routine boundaries, a rhythm that repels chaos, and people will try to interrupt it. They'll call, text, drop by, invite, flatter, guilt trip, not because they're evil, but because they've never seen someone so committed. Your structure offends them. It reminds them that they're at the mercy of their emotions, while you're building your life like a fortress, brick by brutal brick. There's a law hidden in this that no one talks about. The law of withholding. It says the less you give away, the more valuable you become. Not just in words, in presence, in action, in energy. If you're always available, always visible, always explaining, you become familiar. And familiarity breeds contempt. But if you withhold, if you move in silence, protect your schedule, guard your energy, you create mystery, tension, and tension is power. People lean in when they don't fully understand you. They chase what they can't quite grasp. Focus creates that distance, and in that distance, influence grows. And the deeper you go, the more it all simplifies. You stop needing 10 strategies. You don't need to be clever or complex. You need to be consistent, ruthless with your yes, violent with your no. That's where domination lives. Not in bursts of inspiration, not in occasional effort, but in repetition over and over until your results become undeniable, until your presence enters rooms before you do. It's funny how quiet the process is. You're just working, just doing the reps. No applause, no dopamine hits, just discipline. But here's what they won't see. Underneath that stillness, something's growing. A gravitational pull, a weight behind your name. And one day you'll walk into a room and people will pause. Not because you're loud, but because they feel you've built something. And that feeling, that aura, it doesn't come from followers or fame, it comes from focus, years of it, stacked, layered, deep. This is why you don't chase validation, you chase depth. And when you go deep enough into anything, your craft, your body, your business, your mind, you tap into a power most never taste because they're too busy being tourists in their own life. Sampling, quitting, restarting, but not you. You're digging, you're locking in, and it's not glamorous. It's not viral, but it's permanent. And permanence, that's where power lives. Here's what they won't expect. That the quiet one was actually planning everything. That while they marked your discipline, you were doubling your skills. While they played for attention, you were building systems. While they slept on your potential, you were removing every excuse. You were waiting, watching, preparing. And now you don't need to convince anyone. Because the threat isn't in what you say. It's in what you've become. The final stage of focus is this. You no longer need enemies. You no longer need revenge. You're too focused to fight small battles. You've outgrown the war, and that's when they fear you most. Not when you're loud, not when you're angry, but when you're unbothered, when you smile and walk away because they realize you're not playing the same game. You're not even on the same field. You've become the storm they didn't see coming. The result of every quiet decision, every early morning, every night spent building instead of scrolling. You're the consequence of your own focus. And no one can take that from you because it wasn't given. It was earned in silence. You won't announce it. You won't post about it. You won't even say you've changed. But they'll feel it in your absence, in your precision, in the way your eyes don't dart around anymore looking for approval because now they're locked on a horizon no one else can see. That's when you know you've crossed over from potential to power, from noise to command. Not because you shouted, but because you stopped explaining. The world around you is still spinning in circles. Chasing relevance, chasing clout, chasing each other. And you're still not passive, still like a loaded weapon. See, that's the Machiavellian path. You don't compete where they want you to. You don't dance for their approval or fight for their scraps. You build your own arena. And here's the part no one tells you. When you focus long enough, consistently enough, something strange starts to happen. People begin to project power onto you. Even when you're quiet, even when you're not trying, they assume you know something they don't. They sense there's a reason for your restraint, a reason for your silence. And whether they're right or not doesn't even matter. Because perception becomes reality. You start controlling rooms without speaking, controlling dynamics without reacting. And the irony is you no longer crave that control. You've seen what happens when you chase it, it slips. But when you focus on mastery, control comes to you. The meetings move around your availability. The conversations slow down when you enter. People listen more carefully because you've done something they can't fake. You've become something, not a role, not an image, a force. And people obey force in ways they never obey noise. Now here's the part that separates the few from the many. You keep going even when the attention starts to build. Even when their spec starts to grow. You don't let it distract you. You don't mistake recognition for completion. Most people crumble here. They finally get noticed and they stop. They begin performing. They start looking sideways again. But you know better. You remember what it felt like when no one believed in you. You remember the silence, the grind. The discipline it took just to get 1 hour of uninterrupted time. You remember the hunger, so you keep it even when the feast arrives. That's what makes you dangerous. Not that you've arisen, but that you haven't changed. Focus is not a phase. It's a lifestyle, a filter, a daily confrontation between what matters and what's just noise dressed as opportunity. You'll wake up with 10 paths in front of you, and you'll need to choose the one that leads into fire. The hard one, the slow one, the one no one claps for because that's where the transformation happens. In their petition, in the isolation, in the invisible stretch of time where it feels like nothing is working. But you keep showing up anyway. Machiavelli understood this brutal truth. Most men are not defeated by their enemies. They're defeated by their inability to be alone, to endure, to delay the reward. But you're not most men. You've been building in shadows. You've trained your focus like a blade. And now it cuts through distraction like it's nothing. And what comes next? That's up to you. But whatever it is, they won't be ready. Because how do you stop someone who's not chasing anyone? Who doesn't need to speak to be heard? Who doesn't need towing today because they're planning for 10 years from now? You don't. You stay focused until they wonder how you got there. You stay focused until the people who ignored you can't stop watching. You stay focused until you don't just walk into rooms. You change the temperature of them until your name becomes a sentence. Until silence speaks louder than applause. Until they finally realize you were never the quiet one. You were the storm.